So, my exam of life presentation is going to be that I'm not going to have a phone for an entire week. And basically, I'm going to do this during a school week to simulate what it would be like to not have a phone during a regular week rather than just some other time. And there are a couple inspirations for why I want to do this project. And the first one is my sophomore English teacher, Miss Billy. And if you ever had Miss Billy, you would know that almost every single day, every single lecture would be slamming technology and phones. She hated phones. She was always like, technology is ruining our youth, and that our world would be much better off if we completely eliminated our reliance on tech. Which was also interesting because she had us use our phones and iPads every single day to access Google Classroom, which didn't really make sense considering that she hated technology. But the idea is something that does somewhat make sense, right? And it's one reason that, one thing I've taken away from that class is that maybe technology doesn't necessarily benefit our education that much. The second inspiration is going to have to be the OPI trip I took earlier this year. And my friend David Schneidinger said this pretty well on the first night, which is that phones would have totally ruined the trip because it would have reduced our opportunities to bond with one another. But the difference is that the OPI trip isn't exactly like real life, right? Because in OPI, you're in cabins with your friends and people that you want to talk to the entire time. In real life, you still need to do work all the time and communicate in a non-fun setting. You need to communicate to get things done together and to be able to coordinate ride groups and stuff like that, right? So I think this is going to be a really interesting experiment because OPI worked really well, but that was because you only needed to communicate with other people about, oh, when are you going out stargazing? Or when are you actually going to be, I don't know, when are you going hiking today or whatnot, right? It's not exactly high pressure situations and the stakes are pretty low. And we'll see what it's going to be like to not have a phone when, the week is normal and you have stuff that you need to be able to get done. And the last inspiration is going to have to be Into the Wild and Chris McCandless. And even though I'm not doing anything as crazy as going off into Alaska for an entire week or to the desert wilderness like he did, the reality is, I think for someone like me who grew up with so much technology, being without my phone for a week is my own wilderness.
Okay, so there are going to be three important rules that we're going to cover. The first rule, obviously, is that I'm going to go without a phone. But the week that I'm going to go without a phone has to be a school week and not over spring break or something. Because obviously, if it's over spring break and I'm just sleeping in every single day, it's not going to matter whether or not or have my cellular device with me because it's definitely not needed in any sense. It's more interesting to see how not having a phone will play out when you're actually in a work setting and you do need to communicate with other people on the fly and you do need to get projects done on time. The second rule is that I'm still allowing myself to use my computer, and that's overall because my classes all need computers. You need them to access Google Docs. Even in Mr. Simmons's class, we still need to look at passage analysis and stuff like that. So we're definitely still going to need to use our computer. The third rule, though, is that the amount of time that I usually spend on my phone is about 5 hours. So there's no way I'm going to be able to fill up all 5 hours of that time with other stuff that I want to do. But instead, I'm going to try to at least fill up some of that time, dedicate an hour or two every single day towards activities that I really enjoyed growing up and stuff that I've dropped over the past couple of years, but also things that I realized were probably dropped in part because of the fact that there's so much fancy technology that I instead like to utilize, like my phone. And so that's going to be basically part of it. It's going to be things that I enjoyed growing up, things I always wanted to try, or things just like spending time with my brother that I don't get to do as much. And yeah, I'm excited.
Okay, so a couple things I hope to gain from the experience. The first is probably going to be what it's like to live without technology in a world where everyone else already has their phones. The second important thing is probably the benefits versus what we're missing out on by having our phones every day. And I think with this project, I'll really get a sense of the things that I really miss without a phone and the things that, are probably better while I don't have a phone in our world. So basically comparing like the primitive world versus where we're at today. The third important thing is probably going to be relationships and how your friendships and your relations with other people are going to be affected by not really having an effective communication tool, especially since nobody really uses their email, and I'm not really supposed to actually use my email during the trial, during this experiment very much either. So I think those are three things that I want to learn about. And what I expect, I mean, I think in terms of the first two parts that I talked about, probably I'm going to be doing a lot of things that I once enjoyed, like playing piano or playing chess or something. But, oh shoot, I can't really play chess. I'm just by myself. Shoot. Well, I don't know. I guess I'll figure it out. But I expect that I'm going to rekindle some old hobbies that I've kind of dropped as time has gone on. And the second thing, the other part about relationships with friends and stuff, well, I expect that it's going to be a little annoying when I'm not responding to any of their text messages or Snapchats, or I let all my Snapchat streaks die. Oh, shoot, darn. I'm going to have to deal with that sometime. But, yeah, I mean, I think with that, I'm curious. I expect that things should be fine, too. I mean, I don't use my social media that much, but I expect the next week to be a little bit tenuous for my friendships. So, we shall see. Raining. Okay, so the theme that I want to analyze is basically going to be the human-made world versus the natural world. And how this not using your phone for a week ties into it is that I expect that without the phone, which is probably one of the pillars of our man-made world, I'll probably be interacting a lot more with nature, right? A lot of more things spent outside necessarily instead of just sitting around indoors with my phone. Also, I think just overall, it's kind of a good experience to see how people lived before we had phones and other forms of technology. I know I'm technically allowed to use my computer to do my homework, but I'm still not going to be using it for anything else beyond doing my homework, right? So I think this relates overall to the idea of how we spend our time in nature versus the amount of time that we spend with our human-made devices, and kind of just contrasting the pros and cons of each world, right? Because, I mean, with phones, many would argue that makes things so much more efficient because you can learn so much more just by being able to Google something rather than having to like hike to the library or whatever in order to find a book and actually do that stupid Dewey Decimal System or whatever, right? But on the other hand, it does serve as kind of a distraction for what the rest of the world is about. And I think that's one reason why I really liked Into the Wild, right? Because it was really about this difference between how, even though Chris had all the great things that the human-made world would admire, still wasn't really enough, because all he really wanted was to be able to experience the natural-made world. And that quote that we brought up inside of the Examine Life project, in the syllabus for the Examine Life project, is really important, I think. It's that true happiness, well, I'm paraphrasing, but it's about how true happiness is in the things that God has placed all around us. And I expect that during this experiment and during this week without my phone, I'll be able to get a little bit of a sense of what Chris was talking about.
Try to start again. I don't want to be the one the battles always choose, 'cause inside I realize that I'm the one confused. I don't know what's worth fighting for, or why I have to scream. I don't know why I instigate and say what I don't mean. I don't know how I got this way. I know it's not alright, so I'm breaking habits. I'm breaking habits tonight. Watching my cure, I tightly lock the door. I try to catch catch my breath again. I hurt much more than any time before. I had no options left again. I don't want to be the one the battles always choose, 'cause inside I realize that I'm the one confused. I don't know what's worth fighting for, or why I have to scream. I don't know why I instigate and say what I don't mean. I don't know how I got this way, I'll never be alright. So I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit tonight.
Number one takeaway is that sometimes it's okay to be bored. What I've noticed is that even though I filled up the time on my phone with time spent doing other activities, the majority of the time that I'm on my phone is actually during breaks or times when nothing is actually happening and I'm just bored out of my mind. But what I've noticed is that even in these cases where I would normally pull out my phone, it's not even a bad thing to be bored for a little while. Because in these times that you're actually bored, you can instead just soak in your surroundings and enjoy being in the moment rather than having your mind mindlessly stimulated by something that you're reading on your phone. Pros and cons. One of the main pros is that I didn't have to respond to others, felt no sort of obligation to talk to other people if I really didn't want to, and just got to completely ignore the pressures of my Snapchat streak or whatever. Considering the fact that on Saturday morning I got 12 calls on my phone that I heard while I was lying in bed at 11 a.m. and I just realized that, hey, I don't have to respond to them. I don't have to care who's even calling me. I'm just going to be me for the entire day. It's David Day. Cons, really bad communication. My mom tried to call me in order to get me to pick up my brother from school. Didn't exactly work out. No phone. So instead, he overstayed the time limit at the daycare and we had to pay a hefty fine. That was definitely a pretty big con. In terms of surprises, I was surprised at how quickly I noticed the missing of the phone, because I just felt like a weird tingling in my fingers the entire day on the first day that I didn't have it, and gradually towards the end of the week, I was surprised by how quickly it faded, because by the end, I was already just feeling normal. In terms of the difficulties, the main one was actually just in getting started, because I really did not want to spend a week without my beloved phone, so I just procrastinated it for so long. And the catalyst was actually when I left my phone at home, and then I realized, hey, might as well just start doing the Simmons project right now, because at this rate, it's never going to be done with my procrastination. And in terms of my own personal discoveries, in the days after the experiment, what I realized was that the cons of the experiment that I brought up could easily be solved if I just had a flip phone, and I would have the same pros, because a flip phone would still allow me to communicate with other people. But overall, that sort of attitude faded really quickly. And within a couple of days, I was back to using my phone at almost the same rate that I was before. And that even made me implement more time limits on time I'm spending on social media and stuff like that. So what I've overall learned is that spending a week without your phone isn't going to solve your own problems or humans' current addictions towards cell phones. But what it does help is to make you more cognizant about how much time you're spending on it. And that, sometimes you can actually live without your phone for a significant period of time and still be a social person and be able to maintain relatively okay communication. Overall, it just showed me that smartphones and stuff aren't necessarily the end all be all right now. And even though I don't think it's helped necessarily in helping to solve all of my problems, it does make you more aware that problems exist.